Rather than doing a detailed walk around of the entire layout, I thought I would focus this month instead on the places where I've made changes. And so the first of those is coming out of the staging yard here. It's not a terribly visible change. You can tell I've added some background scenery and some foreground rough scenery or initial coat scenery. But I did, after having a lot of issues with this turnout right here, let me zoom in for you. This turnout right down here, I replaced the microengineering turnout with a Pico curve turnout. I didn't even try to power it. It's manually thrown. Frankly, if I was to redo this staging yard again or these staging tracks again, I would just use manually powered turnouts throughout in this area. In this spot, all that's left to do really is to add some ballast down here on this track. You can tell I was replacing turnouts because they're not ballasted, and then and finish up some detailed background painting. And that'll be pretty much what I'm going to do for this corner. Going around here, you can see the rest of the Canadian Pacific staging yard, which is actually on the other end of the line. As I've mentioned before, the two tracks to the left that are going behind that row of trees are the west end of the branch, or the origination of the branch in St. Albans, and the tracks in the foreground there are actually the termination of the branch and our connection with the Canadian Pacific in Richford, about 25 or so miles between those two pairs of tracks, and they're joined together here to facilitate restaging the railroad and also for just continuous running. Moving to the left, as you face the layout, we get to the edge of the town of Berkshire, and so there's been quite a bit of work done on this over the last few months. I've gotten a fair amount of the initial scenery put in place all the way. You can see the train park down there, and you can see the station in the stores. But here I had originally put a feed mill, and I'd shown it, I think, in a previous video. Frankly, it always just seemed a little too big for this place, and so I needed something smaller. And so when I was digging through my boxes of structures, I came across, this is the cannery that used to stand in Waterbury, Vermont, and it was on my old layout. And it, frankly, on a whim, I just sort of put it here, and honestly, I kind of like it. So it's sort of grown roots and become planted in place here. Continuing to move to the left as we traverse the main line here, you can see this is the area where the town of Berkshire is continuing to develop. We have a station in the distance right by the locomotive there. There's a freight house, and then here we have a small industry. This is a woodworking industry of some indeterminate type at this point. This is based on another prototype from Waterbury, Vermont that is a leftover from the last layout. In that case, it was actually based on a ski factory. It could really be any small woodworking building, a cabinet maker or anything of the sort. The main line's going to continue down this unfinished area of the layout, go around the corner of the basement room here, and then proceed past the base of the paper mill peninsula. And so I'm going to take a couple of minutes and I'm going to show you some major changes that I've made there. I've gone ahead and removed the camera from the tripod, so if it's wobbly, please forgive me. One of the things actually on my Christmas list for this year is a gimbal. We'll see if Santa Claus is good to me and brings me a gimbal. I've discussed this area of the layout before. This curve has been a real main bugaboo on the on the layout from the start. Everything was derailing in the original curve. It was simply too tight. That meant that the tracks that went into the mill area, the mill yard itself, were misaligned compared to the curve. I did try replacing the turnout actually twice that was here originally, and you'll notice how clean the plywood is now. That's simply because we ripped out all the old plywood. By the way, this is where the track originally curved out and came down in this arc. We ripped out all the plywood and replaced it with new plywood and have relayed the track, and it's now all fully wired and tested and works much, much, much better. What you see in here are cars and a switch list from where we've been testing out the track in here. One other thing I did here is I tried to be somewhat organized with my wiring, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but down here I have a terminal block, and the way this works is the two bus wires, one is green and one is white, simply because I had green and white wire. And so the bus wire is going from the breaker panel to this terminal block. The bus wire continues to the next terminal block, And all the feeders for this area, all the green feeders or the positive rail feeders, are going into this terminal block. And if you see in the distance there's the white wire going in the similar thing, terminal block. Sorry about that. It's kind of difficult to do this under the layout while I'm holding the camera. Anyway, that's the approach I used to wire this. All that is a long way of saying I think what I'm going to do at some point in this next year is certainly rewire some sections of the layout, especially the Richford Peninsula where there's a lot of track. See, if you look on my channel, I have a number of videos. I've got 2 or 3 videos on doing a forced perspective scene. That is actually an N-scale model of a woolen mill that's serving as a forced perspective trick. And I do obviously need to finish the foreground landforms here, or grass and fields, and etc., and ballast this track. And all this has been waiting until I got this paper mill trackage all rearranged. So if you were wondering, if anybody was wondering where the forced perspective series went, it's waiting to finish that, and I hope to finish this here pretty soon. I may even get to this over the holiday break. I don't know. We'll see. But working our way around here, you can see Thresher's Mill and Williams Creek Bridge. This is a scene I've shown many times on videos and in articles. And then we proceed around the crossing here. Old Man Griffin's barn. And all these buildings, by the way, these names I'm using are named after friends, or actually Griffin. Mr. Griffin was my high school English teacher. He was also a railroad model craftsman author at the time, although I didn't realize it until he busted me reading RMC in class, and then told me that one of the articles in the magazine I was reading was actually his. And the creamery here and the crossing, all this has remained relatively unchanged until this point from the last time we showed a video. And then down here we have more trees, and then in the distance here you can see Streeter's store with the stuff around it has been planted in place. At least the Streeter's diorama has been planted in place, and what's left there to do is to add all those wonderful cast metal details, etc., that you add to these buildings that give them so much character. But the structure, the basic structure is here. It's built into its own separate diorama, so if it ever has to come out of the layout, it can come out hopefully as a unit. One neat thing I did do, or one thing that I'm pleased with how it came out, is this little Esso sign you see here. And that's actually just 2 microscale decals, one on either side, that have been applied to a thin piece of styrene. And then I rusted the sign using some techniques I picked up from Jason Jensen's YouTube channel. And the post and the cross arm and stuff I cobbled up from pieces of wire. The post is from, I believe, Best Trains, if I remember correctly. I think it looks pretty good. I think the sign came out kind of cool. I like how it looks. Some people have told me that an active Esso dealer would never let their sign get that rusty. Get over it, I guess. I don't know what else to tell you. We're going to walk outside walk through the swing gate, past my messy work table, and then we'll go down here, and really not a whole lot has changed over in this area. But what I do have here is I've got the beginnings of a coal dealer at the end here and a lumber dealer. And in the prototype, this is based on the prototype town of Innisburg Falls. And the prototype just had this whole long series of sheds along here, just small sheds, some of which had 1 or 2 car spots, some had 3 car spots. And so I've just kind of represented it through a series of kits and kit bashing that I've cobbled together. I don't have any good photographs of what it looked like, and probably because it frankly wasn't much to look at. And you can see parked here out on a test run is one of the newer Bowser RS3s. At this point I have 4 locomotives on the layout painted for the Central Vermont, physically sitting on the layout, and all 4 are factory painted. I thought I'd never be able to see the day that I could say that, but that's the case. A couple of things I've gotten done in the last few months. I've got this Grant Line oil dealer out of the box again, another one that came out of the box. The green shed in the back here is just a placeholder. And then I've also planted the creamery in the background there, finished the grade crossings and some of the streets here. As we work our way down here, in the corner here, I've done a lot of additional finished scenery. Those of you who follow the blog, which I will put a link to down below somewhere, or at least the address. You've seen this as I've progressed on this scene. This is just a whole lot of Martin Wellberg and static grass and a couple of scratch-built trees all pulled together. There's a few places where, like here, where it's still a little obvious. I've got to go in with a static grass gun and just blend this into the mat is here, and this is from the static grass gun. I've got to blend these two things together and get them to look not quite so obvious. The building in the background there is another leftover from the old layout. That's actually the condensery from Richmond, Vermont. I had it in the box. I decided to put it there. It's another one that kind of grew roots and got planted. I now have information on what the Innisburg Falls condensery looked like. I'm really torn whether to leave this one here, whether to replace it with a scratch build model of the actual building, or whether to put I frankly have a South River Model Works kit I think would look perfect in this spot. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. And really, we've sort of reached the end of the areas of the layout that have had any substantial amount of work done to them. But in the meantime, have a great and happy holiday season, no matter how you celebrate it. Enjoy your family and friends. Find some time for some model railroading. And please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And we will talk to you all in the new year. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.